Here is my roughly week 2 update. As you can see, I have this lovely desert terrain that goes on. Just sort of this is mostly the basic starting stuff in Unreal still. When we last left, I had a car that was working, and I think I had gotten some noise terrain going. The new addition now is that I've got this noise generator asset that I've written in C++ as well. I know I said I was going to stop doing C++, but so much of this just really needs to be in C++. I did not pick a good beginner project. Anyway, so this terrain noise generator is a layered noise generator, and basically it allows you to specify some number of noise layers, and you can, ultimately you could I might add in different types of noise, but you set the scale of the noise, an exponent, which technically isn't used, but I want to use it, and then a height scale for that layer. And so it basically generates a vertical elevation floating point number by combining all of these things together, which I've used here. You can see I've got this very large hill, but I also still have like some smaller hill, like smaller noise and stuff going on along the way. So it looks very nice and relatively convincing as things go for a desert landscape. So now if I go around here, then you can see then it's, you can go up and around and that sort of thing. Before I go too far into that, I actually want to show you the other really cool thing that I worked out with this, and that's that this dynamic terrain actor, if you look, there's it has a lot of extra information in here. So I've got this terrain data that I've created up here, which has kind of information about the topology of each mesh chunk, and it's got a section template and a section stamp, which I end up needing because the stamp gets modified for every single terrain section and then re-uploaded to the procedural mesh. And then there's also this section info, which has a center vector and then a position index, so 32 ints, as well as a mesh index. And what I use that for is, if we go over here into the actor, inside the tick function, you see I grab the player's location and I turn that into a section index, which is related to this same position index here. And then I go through, and based on this players section, I go through all of the stored terrain sections, and I find any whose sections don't surround the players, right? So the player's inside a main section, and actually it's probably just easier to show you. So let's get this started. We'll get going nice and fast. I can usually get up to around 100 kilometers. Oh, I added a speedometer on here. So now that I've got this, let me pull out, and now you can see as the car stopped. Dang it. Well, let's try showing it this way. So as you can see, kind of at the edges, you can see the geometry start popping in as I move through. Let's get over this hill. You might have seen that just then. This is really fun to do. My son loves this. He's 3 years old and he just loves playing my car game because the car gets stuck and flips around, and it's a lot of fun for him. So then it should pretty soon here see a big chunk pop in right up in front of me. There we go. So and there's the car flipping. So that's what's going on is I'm basically chasing the car moving these dynamic meshes around. And I've got it set up right now with 1 extra section and 4 distance sections. And the reason I've got that is because the distance sections, I've got a lower mesh count, a lower vertex count, as well as the distance sections. If you go up here, you can, where everything is created. So I've got a section up here this section is creating the main section, and this is creating the distance sections. And the only significant difference here is at the end of this line, which is the create mesh section linear color. It's the same up here and the same down here. Can I select both of those? No. Anyway, it's the same up here on both of those. The only difference is that here is this be with collisions Boolean, and this one is just always false. And the reason that it's a Boolean is because when I'm in the editor, it doesn't matter if I generate collision meshes. So on begin play, I initialize data with true, but just on construction, which happens when I change data inside the editor, I initialize data with false so that I save time, and the editor responds just a little bit faster. I've actually wasted probably way too much time trying to get the editor more responsive with this whole terrain thing, and I'm kind of calling it done deal with that. So that's kind of I'm pretty happy with this. So the interesting fun thing though is this next part that I've just started working on today and working out, and there've been a ton of edge cases I've been figuring out. So we've been using this terrain noise generator, but this is a terrain with roads. And if you look at this, the noise mapped roads, it inherits from my layered noise generator. So it uses mostly the same code, but I've added in this option for road segments. And what this does is you can specify a start and an end segment for a road on the terrain. And what it will do is when you generate the vertical positions for the terrain, it will detect if it's close to one of these road segments, and it will snap to the road. So just to show you what that looks like, let me pull this over in here. And now you see I've got this big old road in here that I've created. And you can see this goes off into the distance there. And so now I can put roads into my terrains, which is getting really close to kind of the end goal. So I just want to show this off a little bit, drive around. So right here you see the intersection. I'm still working out some of the kinks, and I can show you in more detail one of them after I'm done showing this off. But this is an intersection of those two roads. If I go all the way down here, you can see the terrain detail popping in a little bit more. I want to, but I'm not going to right now, do a little bit more. Oops. I want to do a little bit more work, but there's a diminishing returns issue that I've hit. I want to do more work to make the level of detail terrain stuff even better, because right now it's very, very closely related. The size of each level of detail chunk is very closely related to the size of the main detail chunks. And so if I go into wireframe mode, you can see. So there's a center chunk, and then there's 8 outside chunks around here. And the reason for that is because this is the only chunk that has any collision data. And so I want you to make sure you can always cross over into another chunk. And then as soon as you cross over into that other chunk, it will move the collision data. It will move this. If say you're going this way forward, it'll move this back set to the front recalculate all of those, and then you'll have collision up here ready to go for you. So you'll never cross over into a section that doesn't have collision. But because of this chunk size and the way I have it set up, this corner here, this now has to be always the same size, which means if you look at the kind of the density here, like this part up front right here where you're driving really could stand to be, you know, 4 to 6, maybe even 8 times the density, whereas you go out, you know, just halfway through the detailed chunk and suddenly you don't need that kind of density anymore. And if you go out even further, even that low detail density could be much, much lower still. And so I really want to add kind of a system that allows, as you step out further and further, it allows for larger chunks with less and less and less mesh data further out. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hold off because I really just want to, I could get lost in this and optimizing this all day long. The last thing that I wanted to show that I also am going to kind of put off working on for now is, let me bump this up to like a really high detail for real quick. Even higher, 255. I don't think I allow any more than 255 because it's an unsigned integer. Not quite. I gotta bring this in real quick. Let's set that to 5,000. So now we recreate everything. So now what you can see here is this is the road section that goes down, right? And you can, and like the edges are very smooth here, which is fine. Slow down camera. There we go. But right here there's this clipping, and if you look carefully, you can kind of see that this here is sort of in a radius around the center point, and what that is so the line, the vertex at the road is right about here, and I quickly worked out that because I didn't want I was getting these plateaus initially, because it was I find the closest point for each vertex. I find the closest point to the road, and then if it's within a certain range, I just set it to the elevation of the road at that point. And I was getting these flat sections here at the ends because it was finding that vertex point, and it was creating this flat section, and so I didn't want that. So I then I was like, okay, well, I'll just find the distance from that vertex point, and that seemed to sort of work until I looked more closely at this, and it turns out what's happening is that it's blending only through there. So over here it's actually farther away, so it's trying to get closer to the terrain, but it really should still be getting closer to the road height. So I need to actually do another, if it's the vertex, I need to then find another perpendicular point that's along the road, and then interpolate off of that. So I need to do that at some point. I'm not going to do that next because I want to move on to the next part of the road terrain generation, which, let me just pull up the web page that I'm using to reference this. Is this cool technique that I've been reading about, where you use you kind of use these directed points, or a directed point graph, to generate roads. And I don't want to generate anything this complicated, but I do think that I can take my noise function, the same noise function that's dictating all this terrain here, and I should be able to generate weighted vertices pointing along the contours of the noise function, and from there then auto-generate road points. And I'm going to definitely have to do some kind of a, BSP graph to make it sane. But essentially, I'm going to take a insanely large chunk of terrain and have it pre-processed to generate all of the road sections, split that off into a partition tree, and then generate road chunks so that now then you'll have this wasteland that's not just a the hills of dunes or whatever, but it'll have roads on it that follow the contours of the algorithmically generated terrain. And that's what I'm going to do next. And it's really kind of exciting, and I've definitely bitten off more than I should have for this. But it's fun and exciting, and looking forward to it. So I'll see you at the next update.